The Merchant and the Elf, Part 4, The Man Who Came Looking. The first creature stepped onto the Blackmere road. Tobin had expected something larger. That somehow made it worse. It stood no higher than his waist, with a narrow body folded forward beneath shoulders that seemed too broad for it. Long arms hung almost to the ground, ending in black hooked nails. Its skin had the wet, grey-green appearance of something that had spent its entire life beneath stones, while a pair of oversized ears rose from either side of a face that looked vaguely goblin and vaguely human without belonging comfortably to either. Its mouth opened. There were far too many teeth inside. Tobin tightened his grip around the small dagger. Beside him, Liora's fingers closed around his arm. "What is it?" he whispered. "I don't know." He glanced sideways at her. "You're an elf." Her brown and green eyes remained fixed on the creature. "I wasn't aware that made me responsible for identifying everything unpleasant in the forest. Your people live in forests. My people also live in houses." Another pair of green eyes opened among the trees. Then another and another. Within seconds, the darkness surrounding the carriage was filled with them. Tobin's humour disappeared. There were dozens, perhaps more. Bishop stamped nervously against the road, his entire body trembling beneath the harness. Tobin slowly lifted the reins. "Don't run," Liora whispered. "I wasn't planning to." "You were absolutely planning to. I was considering our options." "You lifted the reins. That was one of the options." The first creature lowered itself onto all fours, its head tilted. Tobin stopped breathing. It wasn't looking at him. It wasn't looking at Bishop. It was looking at Liora. No, not Liora. The key. The black metal had slipped partially from beneath her clothing, hanging against her chest. The creature's luminous eyes followed it. A strange clicking noise began somewhere in its throat. Every creature in the forest answered. The sound moved through the trees like rain striking bone. Liora looked down. Her face changed. "The key." Tobin followed her gaze. "They can see it?" "I don't think they're seeing it." "What does that mean?" Liora's hand closed around the black metal. "I think they can feel it." The nearest creature shrieked. The forest exploded. "Bishop!" Tobin snapped the reins. The mule surged forward just as the first creatures launched themselves from the trees. One struck the side of the carriage hard enough to shake it. Another landed against the canvas roof, its hooked fingers ripping through the material as Tobin ducked beneath a reaching claw. Liora twisted around. "Behind us!" "I am presently occupied with what is in front of us." 3 creatures scrambled onto the road. Bishop swerved. The carriage struck one with a sickening thump. Another jumped. Tobin saw teeth and green eyes coming directly toward him. He threw himself sideways and the creature struck his shoulder. They fell together. Tobin's back slammed against the driver's bench while the creature clawed at his chest, snapping its teeth inches from his face. The smell nearly killed him before the teeth could. "Gods!" He jammed his forearm beneath its throat. The creature shrieked and twisted. Tobin brought the dagger up. Once, the creature screamed. Twice. It fell away. Tobin stared at the blood on his hand. That was the first living thing he had ever stabbed that had not been intended for dinner. He had imagined the experience differently. There was no time to consider it. "Tobin!" He turned. 2 creatures had climbed into the rear of the carriage. Liora kicked one backward, but the second caught her wounded side. Pain folded her. Tobin abandoned the reins. "Liora!" Bishop continued running. Tobin climbed over the bench as the carriage bounced violently beneath him. He grabbed the creature from behind and drove his shoulder into it. The thing barely moved. It turned its head. Tobin suddenly found himself staring directly into 2 glowing green eyes. "Hello," it screamed. "So much for introductions." The creature struck him. Tobin flew backward into a crate. His mother's medical box exploded open beside him. Liora drew a small blade from beneath her clothing and drove it across the creature's arm. It released her. She moved with frightening speed. Wounded or not, there was something graceful about the way she fought, every movement economical and deliberate. Tobin watched for perhaps half a second too long. The creature hit him again. He decided admiration could wait. Together they forced both creatures from the carriage. Tobin climbed toward the front. Then he saw the road. His stomach dropped. There were hundreds of green eyes ahead. The creatures were pouring from both sides of the forest. Bishop stopped. No, 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 Tobin pulled the reins. Bishop. The mule backed away. Tobin tried again. Bishop, I have never asked you for anything unreasonable. Liora stared at him. Tobin glanced at her. Don't. The creatures surrounded them. Liora slowly moved beside him. Her breathing was labored now. One hand pressed against her wounded ribs, while the other held her blade. Tobin looked at the blood beginning to seep through her bandage. You reopened it. I noticed. You need to get inside. And do what? Hide. Where? Tobin looked around the carriage. She had a point. The green eyes continued closing in. One creature crawled beneath Bishop. Another climbed onto a tree limb above them. Tobin tightened his grip around the dagger. He had been frightened many times in his life. He had been frightened of Rennick, of hunger, of losing the carriage, of becoming his father. This was different. This was the kind of fear that stripped away imagination, because imagination was no longer necessary. They were going to die. Liora knew it too. He could see it in her face. She moved closer to him until their shoulders touched. Tobin looked at her. I'm sorry. Her brow furrowed. For what? The carriage. Despite everything, she almost smiled. I chose the carriage. That was exceptionally poor judgment. I've begun to realize that. A creature lunged. Tobin stabbed downward. Liora caught another across the throat. Then 3 came. Then 5. The carriage disappeared beneath them. Tobin stopped counting. He fought badly. There was no elegant way to describe it. He stabbed, kicked, elbowed, and occasionally screamed something he would later insist had been a battle cry. Liora fought better, much better, but she was injured, and there were too many. A creature caught Tobin around the leg and dragged him from the carriage. He struck the ground hard. His dagger disappeared somewhere in the mud. The creature climbed over him. Tobin punched it. The creature looked offended. Tobin punched it again. It opened its mouth. Then its head separated from its body. Tobin froze. The body collapsed across his chest. He stared at it, then at the enormous sword that had apparently passed through its neck. A hand reached down. Not an elven hand, not a goblin hand, a very large human hand. Up. Tobin stared. The man standing over him was enormous, not merely tall. Built. His shoulders looked broad enough to create weather. His arms were bare despite the cold, and almost every visible inch of them was covered in tattoos, dark patterns weaving between old scars. Some scars were thin and pale. Others were thick enough to suggest that whatever had created them had possessed considerable enthusiasm. His complexion was somewhere between bronze and brown, darkened further by travel and sun. Black hair was pulled away from his face, and a short beard framed a jaw that Tobin immediately disliked for being unnecessarily square. The man had nearly as many scars as tattoos. Neither diminished him. If anything, they made him more striking. Tobin stared at the offered hand, then at the man, then back at the hand. He accepted it. The stranger pulled him to his feet so easily that Tobin's boots left the ground for a moment. Tobin disliked that too. Stay behind me. Tobin's brow tightened. I was doing fine. The stranger looked at the headless creature, then at Tobin. Of course. He turned. Tobin hated him immediately. Not truly, but enough. The stranger drew a second blade from behind his back. Tobin looked at the sword in one hand, then the blade in the other, then down at his missing dagger. This was becoming humiliating. The creatures rushed them. The stranger moved. Tobin had never seen anyone fight like that. There was nothing beautiful about it. Liora was beautiful when she fought. This man was violence given instruction. He stepped into the swarm instead of away from it. His sword cut through the first creature. His shoulder drove another backward. He caught a third by the throat with one hand and threw it into two others hard enough that all three disappeared from the road. Tobin watched. His mouth tightened. Unnecessarily dramatic. Liora appeared beside him. Her eyes were fixed on the stranger. "He's very good." Tobin looked at her. She did not notice. Her brown and green eyes followed the man as he moved through the creatures. Something about her expression bothered Tobin. He could not immediately identify why. Then the stranger turned. Firelight from the overturned lantern caught the muscles across his shoulders. Liora's eyes followed them. Tobin's expression changed. Ah, that was why. He's adequate. Liora glanced toward him. Adequate? I've seen better. Where? Tobin paused. Places. Liora looked at him. What places? Markets. You've seen men fighting like that in markets? You haven't visited the right markets. Her mouth curved. Tobin pretended not to notice. The stranger drove his sword through another creature. Liora watched. Tobin watched Liora watching. His jaw shifted. The stranger kicked one of the creatures so hard that it struck a tree. Liora's eyebrows rose. Tobin folded his arms, showing off. He is surrounded by monsters. Exactly. There is no audience. Liora slowly turned her head toward Tobin. There is an audience. Tobin realized what he had said. He looked away. I meant generally. A creature rushed him. Tobin barely managed to duck. Liora killed it. She looked at him. You were saying? Tobin retrieved his dagger from the mud. Nothing. The stranger suddenly shouted, Get the key away from them. Liora's hand immediately went to her chest. How does he know about the key? Tobin looked toward the stranger. I was hoping you knew. I've never seen him before. That made Tobin feel unexpectedly better. Then the stranger looked directly at Liora. Beautiful. When I say run, run. Tobin's head snapped toward him. Beautiful. Liora's eyes widened. The stranger smiled at her. Not a large smile. The kind of smile men like him probably practiced without realizing they were practicing it. Liora actually blushed. Tobin stared at her, then at him. Oh, absolutely not. Liora looked toward Tobin. What? Nothing. The stranger drove his sword into the ground. Then he reached beneath his coat. Tobin expected another weapon. Instead, the man removed a small clay flask. He threw it into the center of the creatures. The flask shattered. A thick silver powder exploded into the air. The creatures screamed, not from pain, fear. They recoiled from the powder. The stranger grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fallen lantern. Run! He threw it. The powder ignited. Blue-white flame tore across the road. The creatures scattered. Tobin grabbed Bishop's reins. Liora climbed into the carriage. The stranger jumped onto the rear as Tobin snapped the reins. Bishop! For once the mule did not argue. They ran. They did not stop until the green eyes were gone. Then they travelled another mile, then another. Only when Bishop began stumbling from exhaustion did Tobin finally pull the carriage beneath an outcropping of stone. For several minutes nobody spoke. Tobin climbed down. His legs almost failed him. He pretended they had not. Liora sat against the carriage wheel while inspecting her wound. The stranger stood several yards away cleaning his sword. Tobin looked at him. Something was bothering him, not the muscles. Although those were irritating, not the tattoos, not even the way Liora had looked at him. There was something familiar about his face. Tobin narrowed his eyes. The stranger wiped blood from his blade. Tobin's stomach tightened. No, it couldn't be. He had seen him before. Greyhaven, almost a year ago. The summer market. Tobin's eyes widened. A leather travelling harness. He had sold this man a leather travelling harness for 12 silver. Tobin remembered it because the harness had been worth perhaps 4, possibly 3. The stitching had been questionable. The leather had been worse. Tobin had described it as southern oxhide. It had been goat, an elderly goat. The stranger sheathed his sword. Tobin slowly turned away. Liora noticed. What? Nothing. You look ill. I nearly died. You looked better while nearly dying. Tobin lowered his voice. We may have another problem. Liora's expression tightened. What? Tobin glanced toward the stranger. He looks familiar. From where? Nowhere important. Tobin. He smiled. It was the smile Liora had already learned meant he was about to lie. I may have conducted business with him. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of business? The normal kind. What did you sell him? Tobin scratched his jaw. A harness. And he purchased it. Liora waited. Tobin looked away. And perhaps the item's value was somewhat open to interpretation. How open? Very. Liora stared. How much did you charge him? 12 silver. What was it worth? Tobin considered lying. Liora's expression advised against it. 4. She folded her arms. Tobin grimaced. 3. Her eyes widened. It was shabby, he admitted. Liora covered her mouth. Tobin pointed at her. Do not laugh. That made it worse. Her shoulders began shaking. Tobin looked toward the stranger. Quiet. You cheated the man who just saved our lives. I did not cheat him. I aggressively interpreted the market. Liora laughed harder. The stranger turned. Tobin immediately straightened. Liora tried to compose herself. The man walked toward them. Up close, he was somehow even larger. Tobin found this unnecessary. The stranger's eyes moved over Liora first. You all right? Liora nodded. I will be. His gaze lingered on her. Good. Then he smiled. You're too pretty to be feeding forest vermin. Liora's cheeks warmed again. Tobin looked between them. He cleared his throat loudly. The stranger glanced toward him. Tobin offered a smile. Thank you for the assistance. The stranger studied him. Tobin's smile became less comfortable. There it was. Recognition. Maybe. The stranger stepped closer. Tobin resisted the urge to step backward. For several seconds the man said nothing. Then his mouth curved. You're a hard person to track down. Silence. Tobin's stomach dropped. Beside him, Liora became completely still. Her hand moved toward the key. Tobin noticed. The stranger noticed neither. Tobin swallowed. You were tracking us? At the exact same moment, Liora asked, You were tracking me? The stranger frowned. His eyes moved between them. What? Tobin pointed toward Liora. You said we were difficult to track. I didn't say we. Liora slowly lowered her hand. The stranger looked directly at Tobin. I said you. Tobin's heart sank. The man stepped closer. Now recognition was unmistakable. You sold me a harness. Liora looked down. Her lips pressed together. Tobin knew she was trying not to laugh. He maintained his dignity. Yes, 12 silver. It was an excellent harness. The stranger stared at him. Tobin cleared his throat. Mostly. The man's jaw tightened. That thing broke 3 miles outside Greyhaven. Tobin winced. 3? Yes. I had estimated 5. Liora made a strangled sound beside him. The stranger's eyebrows lowered. Tobin raised both hands. In my defense, you told me it was Southern Oxhide. It was from the south. It was goat. Tobin hesitated. The goat may have lived south of somewhere. Liora turned away. Her shoulders shook. The stranger stared at Tobin for another moment. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. It was deep and loud and genuine. Tobin looked confused. The man slapped one enormous hand against Tobin's shoulder hard enough to nearly send him forward. I have been looking for you for 6 months. Tobin rubbed his shoulder. To kill me? The stranger considered it. At first. Tobin nodded. Understandable. But then I started hearing stories about the merchant who could sell rain to fishermen. Tobin's expression changed. You heard about me? Everywhere. The stranger extended his hand. Kale. Tobin looked at it, then accepted. Tobin. Kale smiled. I know. Liora stepped forward. And I'm Liora. Kale turned toward her. His expression softened immediately. I was hoping you'd introduce yourself. Tobin watched. Cale took Leora's hand. Then, without breaking eye contact, he bowed slightly over it. Tobin's jaw tightened. Liora smiled. Not politely, actually smiled. Tobin looked toward Bishop. The mule looked back. "Don't," Bishop chewed. Tobin folded his arms. Cale released Leora's hand. "What are you doing this far inside Blackmere?" Leora's smile faded. Tobin and Liora looked at one another. Neither answered. Cale noticed. His eyes moved between them. Then his gaze dropped. Toward Leora's chest. Toward the chain. Toward the black key. His expression changed. The humor disappeared. Slowly, Cale looked back toward the road they had traveled, then toward the darkness ahead. "You two have no idea what you're carrying, do you?" Tobin studied him. "You know what this is?" Cale looked at the key. For the first time since appearing, the enormous warrior looked genuinely afraid. "I know enough." Liora stepped closer. "Then tell us." Cale's eyes met hers. "I will." He glanced toward Tobin. "But not here." "Why?" Cale looked toward the surrounding forest. The night had become quiet again, too quiet. "Because those little things weren't trying to kill you." Tobin frowned. They made a remarkably convincing attempt. Cale shook his head. "No." He pointed toward the key. "They were trying to take that." Leora's fingers tightened around it. Tobin looked into the forest. "And what happens if they get it?" Cale's scarred face hardened. "That depends on who sent them." Tobin's eyes returned to him. "Sent them?" Cale nodded. "Those creatures don't hunt in swarms unless something calls them." The humor disappeared from Tobin's face. Liora slowly looked toward the darkness. Far behind them, somewhere beyond the trees, a single pair of green eyes opened and disappeared. Cale reached for his sword. "We need to move." Tobin looked toward the exhausted bishop. "To where?" Cale's gaze moved north. "There is an old fortress beyond Blackmere. If the walls are still standing, we can make it before tomorrow night." Liora looked at him. "You know the way?" Cale smiled. "I've traveled most places people are smart enough to avoid." Liora smiled back. Tobin watched the exchange. Then he looked down at his dagger. Then at Cale's enormous sword. Then at Cale. Tobin straightened his shoulders slightly. "I'm driving." Cale looked at him. "I didn't ask." "I know." Leora's eyes moved between the two men. A knowing little smile touched her mouth. Tobin saw it. "What?" "Nothing." "That was not nothing." She climbed into the carriage. "Come on, merchant." Cale laughed and followed. Tobin stood alone for a moment. He looked toward Bishop. "I don't like him." Bishop snorted. Tobin pointed at him. "You don't either." The mule began walking toward the carriage. "Traitor." Tobin climbed onto the driver's bench. Behind him, Cale said something quietly to Liora. She laughed. Tobin's eyes narrowed. He snapped the reins slightly harder than necessary. The carriage lurched. Cale caught himself against the side. "Easy, merchant." Tobin looked over his shoulder. "My apologies." He was not sorry. The carriage continued north. 3 travelers now instead of 2. A merchant who had spent his entire life surviving with words. An elf carrying a key that kingdoms would kill to possess. And a warrior who seemed to be everything the merchant was not. Strong, fearless, capable. The sort of man who entered a hopeless fight and changed its outcome simply by arriving. Tobin told himself that was why he disliked him. It had absolutely nothing to do with the way Liora smiled when Cale spoke. Nothing whatsoever. At least that was what Tobin Vale told himself as they disappeared deeper into Blackmere. And somewhere far behind them, the green-eyed creatures gathered again. Only now they were no longer following the key. They were following the one who carried it.